Hi, this is Alexandra Kitty. We are at Clue IQ Chronicles, Crime, Code, and Clues. Today we're going to be talking about a new podcast I started called Officer Down. This was an idea I had for a television show when I still was thinking of doing episodic television. And then I started with gaming. And yet I didn't want to do Officer Down as a gaming series. So I decided, okay, I will do a podcast for the simple reason is I don't want to do a lot of them. There's about maybe 10, 15 cases I wouldn't mind going. So this would be, it could expand. It could not. What I wanted to do was something a little different, where the victim is somebody who works in law enforcement. And it's a lot dicier to do than most people realize. There's a lot of people who don't like law enforcement, so they don't see them as people. But I said, okay, I don't care. People are people. And I wanted to explore what happens when the victim is a police officer, or any other person, like parole officer, anybody has anything to do with law enforcement. So I started with the Mayerthorpe 4 that happened in Alberta in the early aughts, and that episode aired. And now I'm working on other episodes. So this is now a weekly thing for me. We'll see how the first season goes, and I'll continue from there. But it's interesting. There is a lot of information out there about officers who've been killed, but yet not covered through true crime because such a formula where everything has to be a defined role. The killer has to be a bad guy. The victim has to be an angel. Law enforcement absolutely 98% of the time has to know what they're doing. Every once in a while, you'll have somebody veer into the police bungling an investigation. So when they bungle an investigation, that's a big part of the story. And a lot of times this comes out because the family's not happy with it. And usually there'll be circumstances. Number one is if it's a child that's been missing and the police classify this child as a runaway. If something bad can't happen to you if you've run away from home. So that's ridiculous. So yes, it's not like you should see everybody as perfect. We all have our flaws, but that's not a reason to blame somebody for something that's happened to them. So I wanted to do Officer Down because there's been a lot of cases where multiple police officers were killed in the line of duty. There's been a lot of cases that were historic first. So when I was looking at the cases, I was looking for interesting cases and ones that maybe we know very well, and a lot of them that we don't actually, you don't get a lot of publicity for. They might get local coverage, but it doesn't make national news. And being a police officer is a very dangerous job. So I wanted to look at cases, not just the ones that their end of watch and they died in the line of fire. A lot of times could be a domestic case. So from FBI agents to state troopers, this series looks at these kinds of homicides. So first season, I'm strictly looking at officers who died in the line of duty. But second season, I'm going to be branching out to more different kinds of cases where the police officer was killed. And it didn't have to be where they were uniform. Sometimes their spouses wanted the insurance money or they wanted to end the relationship. Sometimes it's, the children, they get into an argument or altercation with the parent. So there's a lot of going on. We might have them covered, those in a true crime, but not as a collective of, people think if you're a police officer, you're afforded some sort of protection when it's the absolute opposite. So I wanted to look at that. So I didn't want to do it in gaming form. Not for any other reason. It just didn't seem, the vibe for me was more podcast than interactive documentary. Not that I wouldn't do it. It could very well turn into an interactive documentary style. But right now I have my plate is full. I'm working on various games and I'm a little bit behind because I got sick. So that's where I am with it now. So the first case I'll go over was why I wanted to pick the Mayerthorpe 4. Simply because there were so many things that went wrong. So you're looking at a case where you have four fairly young RCMP officers going in this isolated rural area that had a lot of crime. And their target was known to police, and their target actually had personal information about police officers. So somebody obviously fed him things. So there's a lot going on that we never really found out about. So while we can focus on the absolute tragedy of these four young men who were gunned down in the span of 3 minutes, this went down fast. Was why did this killer have a list of personal information about the area officers? Because there wasn't that many. Because this was an understaffed area. So they had more positions that were open than there should have been. So how did this happen? This is very interesting to me. And yet this is something that is not mentioned anywhere. We know what it is, but we don't know the how and the why. Did they ever look in it? The killer wasn't somebody who seemed like a hacker. This is somebody who had somebody on the inside, despised police officers. So it's very interesting. Here's somebody who doesn't like police officers and yet had to have somebody on the inside give him this intel. And yet that's not something you can delve into by the nature of getting freedom of information in Canada. So how did this man get all this information? And this was premeditated. He decided he was going to take down as many police officers as he. So this is one of these cases where it wasn't the heat of the moment. A lot of times when an officer shot and killed, it is literally in the heat in the moment. The criminal didn't expect to be caught. One thing leads to another, and then there's a fatality. This man knew what he was doing. And he had two Confederates who knew what he was doing and yet helped them, although there was no gain or benefit to either of these men to do so. So when you're looking at such cases where the victim has training, the victim actually knows the psyche of criminals because that's their job, to hunt them down. They're with them all the time. They use them as informants, all this other stuff. They testify against them. They arrest them. They have to build cases against them, get search warrants. So the one type of person a police officer should know exceedingly well is a criminal. And yet even then, sometimes I think it's the title of police officer that almost makes policemen think that they're not above the law, but that they're in a different category than other people, and that they are trained with a gun and everything, and something won't happen to. Although I find interesting these days, when we see police body cam in footage, what we see is more of a human reaction to tragedy. So it's not like they come in cold and go, okay, here's the body, here's the head over here. I mean, there's distress, there's distraught. You can feel the pain. So this is an interesting subgenre of true crime for me. What's going on during this tragedy where the person who is supposed to protect others cannot protect themselves? So as I go on through the weeks of doing this, I'm going to be talking about different cases from all over the world. So it'll be Canada, US, UK, other countries. It's going to be a little bit of everything. First season, as I said, in the line of fire. Second season, we'll take it beyond. So that's all I have to say for myself this week. Hope you enjoyed it. If you liked what you heard, subscribe, like, comment, and share. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye for now.